Problem 25 tells us to graph this inequality, and you might think, what in the world am I supposed to do with this? But I want you to think about it just for a minute. Let's think about it as if it were x squared plus y squared equal 1. Wouldn't that be a circle with center 0, 0, and the radius is the square root of 1, so it would be 1. Let's just graph that much, okay? So we put our 0, 0. We have a radius of 1. That just means it goes 1 to the left, 1 to the right, 1 up, 1 down is how we can graph it, okay? So generally, there's my graph. I did miss a point or two. Now, what does it mean when it's greater than or equal to 1? Okay, it means that if I look at this whole equation here, the points on the circle count as a solution because of this line under the greater than sign, but where are all the other solutions? They are not. If it was less than 1, they would have been inside the circle. But since it's greater than or equal to 1, it means it's everything outside the circle. So my solution set would be to color in everything outside the circle. That's the only difference when it says an equal sign or a greater than sign. It's kind of like when we were graphing linear inequalities at the end of Algebra 1, and you had to do shading. Well, this just has some shading in it. And if it were less than 1, it would have been inside the circle, but since it's greater than or equal to 1, it's outside the circle. Okay, I thought we'd look at number 43. We're supposed to graph each semicircle. Just for a minute, I want to show you where this came from. What if this had been x squared plus y squared is equal to 25? This was the equation of a circle, and what they did was they subtracted the x squared from both sides, and then they have y squared is 25 minus x squared. Now, when you solve for y, you square root both sides. Do you remember that you're supposed to put a plus and a minus on it? Okay, well, the problem we were given is like this, except it just doesn't have any plus or minus on the outside. That means they only want the positive root. If I wanted to graph a whole circle, I'd have had to take what I have down here at the bottom, and I would have had to have two lines. On y1, I would have had to put the square root of 25 minus x squared, and that would draw the positive half of the circle. And then I'd have to have negative square root of 25 minus x squared. You can't draw a circle on your graphing calculator without splitting it up into two parts, because a circle's not a function, and your graphing calculator won't graph a function. See, it would fail the vertical line test, wouldn't it? Draw my vertical line all the way through. So this is just half of the circle. And so if we're going to do the positive half of the circle, what that ends up looking like, if in some ways I think it's better to go over here and undo it this way, or to see how they got this. Because if this has a center of 0, 0 and a radius of 5, it's going to be 5 to the right and 5 up. The whole circle would be this, wouldn't it? But they're not. You can only graph the positive half of that. So what would the positive half look like? It would look like this. This would be the semicircle you'd be graphing right here. To get that other part, if you were to put this on your graphing calculator, you'll see that this is what you'll get. If you wanted the whole circle, you'd have to go enter both of these things over here. So this is just trying to point out to you in subtle terms that a circle is not a function. So if I want to graph it, the whole circle, I have to graph two functions, the positive part and the negative part, to get the whole thing. And so if they just ask you to graph it and it doesn't have a negative out front, you're just getting the top half of the circle. The bottom half of the circle would come if I entered this on my calculator. So you can play around with your calculator and check that out. By the way, that's going to be what's going to happen in this whole unit. Because we're dealing with squares, and when you square root, you get a positive and a minus root. If you just type the equations that you see in without doing it on two lines, one with the positive of the function when you solve for y, and one with the negative of the function when you solve for y, you're only going to get half your graph. So if you type it in and you think, this isn't looking right, it's because you actually have to enter it as two separate things to make it a function.